I just noticed. All right, let's get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the special session, Global Peatland Assessment. We have several speakers, and first of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Patrick Shield from Global Peatland Initiative at UN Environment Program, and to put the program together and get all the PowerPoint file available as well. And also, I'd like to thank the International Peatland Society and the organizer of International Peatland Congress for facilitate this special session, so make all the necessary arrangements. So a lot of work. So especially Professor Meng Wang, so put a lot of time and effort into organizing, arranging this this special session. So I think on the program, so we have the list of the speaker going to provide overview of different aspects of global peatland assessment. So with focusing on the global chapter and Asian chapter. So I think I'm going to move forward. Just the first of all, I'm Cheng Yu from Northeast Normal University and Chinese Academy of Science, both in Changchun, and so I'm going to coordinate this special session on global peatland assessment, locally here. And I think the first, I'm going to provide 50 minutes or so overview about global peatland assessment. So now everyone can see the PowerPoint file. And okay, the global peatland assessment, so GPA, is a major flagship product of the Global Peatland Initiative, which set the baseline for global peatland research and policy. So it's the most comprehensive assessment of peatland today, providing a better understanding of what peatland are, where they are found, and what conditions they are in, and how action can be taken to protect, restore, and sustainably manage them. So the GPA brings together the latest science to inform and inspire action in policy, research, and practice, and building the evidence base to establish state of world peatland. So GPA was launched during the United Nations Conference of Parties in 2022, in November 2022, I think in Scotland, so COP27. And so GPA consists of 2 global chapters, and chapter 2 on global peatland extent and status, and chapter 9 on policy and governance options for peatland conservation, restoration, and sustainable management, and 6 regional chapters, mostly based on the continent. So chapter 3, Africa, chapter 4, Asia, and chapter 5, Europe, and chapter 6, Latin America, and the Caribbean, and chapter 7, North America, and 8, Oceania. So it includes an updated global peatland map. So Alice is going to provide more detail later on, and a hotspot map to highlight threat and opportunity for peatland. So major focus of this assessment is on how better peatland management can be deployed as a natural-based solution to halt biodiversity loss support climate change adaptation, support climate change resilience, mitigating further climate change, and support well-being of community living in this landscape. It has been written to help decision maker advance sustainable peatland management and encourage urgent action for their conservation and restoration. So therefore, a summary for policymaker was created and published in English, French, and Spanish. So making it an ideal tool for engaging with the decision maker. This document summarizes the current state of peatland policy framework in which in each continent and identify key policy recommendations. It is designed to ensure that policymakers are informed by the latest scientific findings, enabling them to make well-informed decisions for the effective conservation of peatland. By providing accessible and comprehensive information, the summary aims to bridge the gap between science and policy. So, so they show the cover of three different language versions. And so this assessment was only made possible through a remarkable collaborative effort from numerous peatland experts, scientists, and knowledge holders who generously volunteered their time and expertise. The assessment was developed at a relatively, speedy process. So with concept notes approved in February 2021, and the main assessment process from March 21 to September 2022. So this table shows the different structure that were involved in preparing the assessment. But the bulk of the work was carried out by the author, the reviewer, and the review editor, and other information provider. So adding up to 226 contributors from 51 different countries, and with a very reasonable gender balance of 44% women. And so we can see some of them at work here. So yeah, this is one of the many, I think, remote meeting. And so here show, I think we have a two version of Mr. Patrick Shield and Hans and Alex and myself in this particular screenshot. So this is a summary of people getting involved. And this is Global Peatland Map 2.0, which enhance our core knowledge of location and extent of peatland worldwide, and serve as the foundational map for global peatland assessment, which consolidate best available science to provide a comprehensive global overview of the state of world peatland. But Alexandra will discuss more about including mapping method and other symmetrical hotspot map. So peatland are nearly everywhere. And we can see that on this map of peatland extent per country. So peatland can be currently found in 177 out of the 193 UN member states. And as our research and mapping technology and approach expand, we are discovering more and more peatland across the area around the world. So particular case, 2 years ago, we found in Congo, large peatland, and in some other part of Africa and South America. So this is thanks to our increasing partnership with the researcher and the government as we work together to enhance the global peatland database, which Alexandra Gassenet will speak more about it afterward. So a quick overview of key global data resulting from a GPA research analysis. So globally, there are approximately 488 million hectares of peatland, making up just 4% of global surface area. Around 12% of world peatland are degraded, primarily due to intensive agricultural activities. So we heard some of that, at the Congress, different section, different talk. Regarding greenhouse gas emission coming from peatland, there are approximately 2,000 megaton of CO2 emission annually, and coming from global degraded peatland. We can see this list with the top. Okay, let me see. And let me finish that slide. So, we can see this list with the top country with the largest peatland area, providing a clear indication of where conservation efforts are mostly needed, especially considering that only about 19% of peatland are located within protected area. So the GPA provides additional valuable statistics concerning peatland carbon stock, biodiversity, and threatened species, and Ramesses site. So based on global peatland database and UN environmental program has created online interactive platform to host the global peatland map and other thematic map online. The interactive map allow users to explore the map, zooming in and out, download the dataset, and view various hotspot map and access informative story map per region, which provide accessible and easy to understand the explanation of global state of peatland through map and story. So this platform is designed to design not only for the scientific community, but also for policymaker and the general public, aiming to raise awareness about the importance of peatland protection through visual contact. So this is a kind of brief summary, and here lists the the information here, the resources, including Global Peatland Initiative website, the Global Peatland Assessment you can download online, and the online Global Peatland Map and Asia Peatland Story Map. So, and you will see that list of resources later on at the end of almost every talk. So I think that's the kind of quick overview of Global Peatland Assessment. And so, then in the next couple of hours, we're going to move forward, getting into more detail. And so based on our program, so next we invite the Alexandra Ambassador from Griswold Mine Center in Germany to talk about the global peatland distribution. So, so please welcome Alex to give a remote presentation from Germany. Alex, let me stop sharing slide, and you can share your slide. Okay, here we go. I need some help, so I can see on the computer screen, but not on the monitor.
Okay, now you have the full screen, or?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm just following up on the global peatland on the peatland map that we prepared in context of the global peatlands assessment. Actually, the global peatland map is a product that draws a lot from the global peatland database that we have at Griswold Mine Center, and that already began in the 1990s, and with the collation of information headed led by Hans Josten, my colleague, and hosted at the International Maya Conservation Group. Since 2012, actually, at the moment I came back from my second maternity leave, I stepped into the global peatland database work, and we started to include spatial data. So before we did not focus on spatial data, but then we shifted this focus, and this was majorly triggered by the appearance of free satellite imagery from Google Maps, and that we found a lot of online archives for legacy data, soil mapping, and so on, and got the idea that we could compile this together for a better overview on the global peatland extent. Then we got this nice project together with UNEP and FAO and the Global Peatland Initiative project founded from Germany government under the ICI umbrella. And this triggered a really major update for the peatland data, for the peatland map we had and the database. And this also involved, I think, about 10 of my master students or other collaborators that we have during all the years. Yeah, what are we doing? So if we call this a global peatland map, this covers all scales. So we are collating data from all scales in the database. We say just mapping, but we use multiple data sources, types, and methods. So I will explain a bit further on. And also our database includes information not only if it is called peat or peatland, but also covers organic salts and histosalts. And if we don't find these kind of direct peatland indication data, then we also fall back on indicative proxies. So you already have seen the map. This is the version that we have in the Global Peatlands Assessment, the Global Peatland Map 2.0. We will further follow up to fill in the gaps. So this is an ever-growing database, and also this Global Peatland Map will be amended or filled more. You can see the peatland in the darker, the peat-dominated area in the darker brown, and in the lighter brown, the peat that occurs in soil mosaic. So methods again, if you are going to map something, normally, or let's say the most preferred approaches are top-down processes, where you use remote sensing or modeling-driven prediction of global peatland extent. We did the other way around, so we came not from above, but from a bottom-up process. So we aggregate national, regional, and local data sets for a global peat extent. We have aggregated for this map more than 200 data sets indicating the global peatlands, organic soils, and suitable proxy data. And we integrated a vast amount of different input data combined with landscape and peatland ecological knowledge and ancillary GIS data. We use a quite generic peatland definition that can be compared to the one that is used by IPCC for the organic soil. Yeah, using data from all scales, I think I said it before. The map that we have here now, the status of this map, we think that it is a major update of the peatland map that have been available. It depicts the global hotspot of peatland distribution more complete. It improves peatland data for many tropical countries, and it builds, and this had also been said already by by my colleague before, it builds on a huge amount of new regional peatland knowledge that has been also contributed by the multiple authors of the Global Peatlands Assessment. However, still, many regions and countries must be accurately and comprehensively mapped to guide regional and especially local action. So we need to see national efforts and for peatland mapping, and maybe we have to use some simplified mapping method to really get this vast spread peatlands that often are not that big as the Congo Basin, mapped and protected and used properly. Yeah, as I said, the manifold smaller peatlands can also not be depicted in a global map with a scale from 1 to 1 kilometer grid size. So this is the one that is available for download. The other thing that we have done in the Global Peatlands Assessment is that we developed thematic hotspot maps. So for that, we, at the one hand, had the data set from our Global Peatland map, and then we selected thematic global layers to overlay it with the peatland map. Then we transferred these both maps in point data and calculated the hotspot with kernel density estimation in ArcGIS. And what it is, it can be seen here like that. So this the product is a heat map that is a graphical representation of the point data density distribution. And this is what behind our hotspot maps. So I have to say that the quality of this product is dependent on the quality of the input data sets. So the input data sets are not perfect, especially on a global scale. So the hotspot maps are not perfect, but we think they give a good idea on all the topics that we cover on a global basis. And here you see some examples for these hotspot maps, as they have been included in the Global Peatlands Assessment Annex. So we have a map on mountains. We have biodiversity hotspots that range across the tropics, preferably. Then we also, during the process, discovered that we have a lot of peatland and organic soils under subarid climates. So this is major because of the discharge of major rivers to these regions. We have seen that most of the peatlands that we have globally is outside of protected areas. So in this lower left map, the red areas, we can see that of the northern extent of peatlands, a lot of them are related or occur within permafrost regions. And we did also some overlay we also have produced greenhouse gas emission hotspot maps or maps. And here's the one you can see the greenhouse gas emissions related to the emissions from fossil fuel on a national country base. So the Global Peatlands Hotspot Atlas is coming up. So many of the hotspot maps will be revised for this, or have been already. We are already in the finalizing. We are already finalizing the hotspot atlas. These hotspot maps will be accompanied by pictures, graphs, and text explaining thematic content, and thus enhance map understanding and usability. And these are how these how they look now with the new layout. Again, the map on biodiversity, protected areas, but also on the mountains. We have hotspot now where we say that mountain peatlands are most far spread. We have also added some new ones. So we have here hotspot on mining, on urbanization, and also on floods. Yeah, and I come to my end. So some final thoughts. So all maps produced under the GPI-ECI process can be useful for decision makers, the research community, and the general public to understand peatlands visually on a global or continental scale. However, many regions and countries, especially in the Southern Hemisphere, still has to be comprehensively and accurately mapped to guide local action. So what we see since few years that peatlands interest, research, and information is increasing. And I think it also have been said, but it cannot be said, so it should be said more and more. Collaboration brings knowledge together, and we are very grateful for all the contributions and contributors to the map that we keep on filling up. So yeah, be part of the solution. I thank you for your time and wish you a great session today.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alex, for that very informative presentation. And Alex is the leading author on producing this global peatland map 2.0, and it is a major contribution to the global peatland assessment and for many other products in the future. So I think we'll have time for questions. So if anyone in the audience, locally or remotely, has a question for Alex, we do have a few minutes. Okay. Go ahead.
So I have a question about the hotspot map. So what's the process of selecting the different layers to overlay with the peatland map? I see there's mining and then there's mountains. So what other considerations go into selecting those hotspots?
Okay, can you hear the question?
Yes, I
Alex?
hear the question. Yes, I have the question. I have here this. Thank you for the question. So actually, on one hand, we have focused on threats that we have globally identified. So it is quite, we have on agriculture, we have forestry, we have also mining. So we collated the threats or informed us or got informed by the authors of the Global Peatlands Assessment, which threats they are occurring in their regions. And then we were looking for appropriate global layers. And we then have to choose upon. So there are several around for all these topics. And we agreed with some, for every of the chapters of the Global Peatlands Assessment, we had somebody responsible for the mapping part, and with some of them we had also regular exchange of which of the thematic layers would be best, and also we got some advice from UNEP, for example, from WCMC for the biodiversity data we got from them. So it is within the process we agreed about the topic to cover. And then we also agreed about the thematic layers to be used. It is a selection on this state that we think it is the most comprehensive to cover threats, but also values of peatlands.
Okay, we have another question from a local audience.
Thanks very much, Alexander. This is Andrew Wardell from the Center for International Forest Research, based in Indonesia. Alexander, I wanted to ask, is any work being done on the GPI to address the specific information needs of the next generation of peatland users? Are you doing anything that's targeting school children, for example?
So on the level I'm working, not, and I think it was also not a very broad topic. It would be good to work on this more. At the Graduate Meyer Center, we are doing a lot of also these interactions within specific projects. So within this project and for the work I am doing, I think it was not the major focus. Yeah. But with other projects we have here, and I'm sure also a lot of other organizations are doing, considering also this topic.
We have another question from a local audience, and then from the remote.
Can you explain more about greenhouse gas emission map? What kind of data does it include?
Yeah, this is also a bit complex. So at the one hand, so it are parts from the Global Peatland database. At the one hand, we use for the area the data that if we are sure we have good enough spatial data in the map, then we have extracted the area data for degrading peatlands from the map. But still, we think that the map has gaps and has also some estimation in some of the areas. We have also compiled a lot of evidence in a database that we call the Global Peatlands Emission Database, where we search through ancillary data. And for example, for the industry countries, we are widely drawing back on the national reporting to the UNFCCC for the areas. If we have this geodata, we have our knowledge, so we then wait in, because sometimes you get national data that are also not appropriate, and then we draw back for area data estimates that we can get for peatland, from peatland time, from soil mapping. So that is a quite thought through assessment based on spatial data, but also ancillary data. For the emission factors we then applied, we basically used the IPCC supplement, wetland supplement emission factors.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we have extra 15 minutes from this afternoon. So if people have questions, we can ask more questions. So now, see any people audience remotely has questions for Alex?
New chat.
Okay, chat, the type of question. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, this I don't think that's the real question. Yeah, I think that. Any question from audience remotely or local? Any more questions here? All right. Thank you very much, Alex, again for the presentation. Okay, let's move on to the next presentation by Mr. Taizhou China from Global Environment Center, and Taizhou going to talk about the identification for peatland in Cambodia using remote sensing and field survey. Please welcome the Taizhou presentation.
So thank you very much. What I'm going to present, identification of peatlands in Cambodia using remote sensing and field survey. Actually, some of this is updated after the completion of the Global Peatland Assessment 2 years ago. So there's some new additional information that we have found. And this presentation has been prepared by a number of parties. Dr. Lee Pat Khoi from the Center for Environmental Science and Ecology from Vietnam, who led the remote sensing and the field surveys. The Ministry of Environment, Dr. Sray Sun Nen from the Ministry of Environment and his team, who facilitated the work in Cambodia and responsible for conservation of some of the sites. And myself and Serena Liu from Global Environment Center, who've been also partner in facilitating the surveys. So basically, we'll just touch on the methodologies used and the results in terms of some of the recent peatland surveys. So prior to 2012, despite numerous land assessment and other surveys, there were no records of any peatlands occurring in Cambodia. Nothing in the literature, nothing in the reports. But starting about 12 years ago, when we had some first work under the framework of the ASEAN program, ASEAN Peatland Management Initiative, and the ASEAN strategy, we started to identify peatlands starting 2012. So for the past 12 years, Global Environment Center with Ministry of Environment and support from CSE Vietnam and various other partners have undertaken various surveys, both remote sensing and ground survey. And these have been funded by a range of funders, International Fund for Agricultural Development and the Global Environment Facility, IFAD-GEF, the European Union through the ASEAN Secretariat and GIZ, the EU Super Program, and IUCN-GF Mekong Peatlands project have been the main project that have supported peatland surveys. Just in terms of the main methodology that was used, remote sensing by satellite image interpretation, some secondary documentation such as maps for geology, topography, soil groups were used as reference just to identify areas of interest, because those existing maps don't mark any peatland area at all, but some general soil groups and other things were used to identify possible areas. And then we analyzed the Landsat 8, Spot 5, and Sentinel-2A satellite images to identify ground surface object features indicative of peatland characteristics, looking particularly at moisture levels, soil color, and vegetation cover. And then we delineated potential peatland through satellite image analysis, and then checked that in the field. So basically, for the field surveys, we based on the potential areas from the remote sensing, and then we visited the site. We also discussed with the local community or agencies, and then undertook the field survey and mapping. And basically, what we found was very interesting, and basically the results were then incorporated in field survey reports and GIS mapping. So in terms of basically we found 3 types of peatland. As I said, in 2012, no peatland was known from Cambodia. And basically we found 3 categories of peatland. One, coastal peatland, very unusual, occurring fully in mangrove forest. So this is one of the relatively few documented mangrove peatlands occurring in Asia. And then we found the inland peat associated with the Mekong River and the Tonle Sap Lake. And then we found some upland peatland on the mountains between Cambodia to Vietnam. So in terms of the coastal peatlands, we have now documented, initially we found about 5,000 hectare in the first survey, and then subsequently over the years, we found that almost 70+% of mangrove along the coast of Cambodia has peat. So this is a very quite unusual. In the rest of Southeast Asia, which has much more mangrove, we hardly find the peat within the mangrove. And the mangrove peat, you can see some example there, quite fibric in nature, up to 2.5 meters thick deposits in the mangrove. And we also get, as we do in other freshwater, other peatland areas, we get this concentric rings of a different vegetation types occurring within the system. So you can see at the outer edge, in more frequent tidal area, then we're getting a Rhizophora species or Avicennia species. And then as we come into the peat area, then we're getting a range of mangrove trees such as Lumenceria and Zylocarpus, which tend to be species which occur more on the freshwater side, but normally they would be found just in intertidal mudflat and back swamp area, but on mineral soil. But here in Cambodia, we are seeing growing on the peat deposits up to 2 to 3 meters. On the inner side, we are also finding Melaleuca. Melaleuca is more commonly found in peat in other countries in the region, but rarely to have mangrove and tall Rhizophora and other species to be found in peat is quite a unique finding. We also found, one could say, stunted forest. We know that in the large peat swamp forest in Indonesia, for example, we get the zone 6 or the Padang forest in the center on top of the dome, which is a stunted forest because these are generally very nutrient poor system. And we get like a stunted mangrove forest. We really don't have enough detail to look at the age, whether it's an issue to do with the age of the vegetation, but really seem to be quite a stunted mangrove forest growing in the deep peat area in the mangrove. So it's quite a very unique mangrove ecosystem. We've not yet probed about the age of the peat or the actual the formation, how it was formed, whether it is entirely formed within the mangrove or whether there was some precondition or pre-formation before mangrove. But as I showed from the photos, we're getting a very fibric peat near the surface, which does imply relatively little decomposition, or that it's relatively fresh, relatively new, rather than it's a very old deposit. So this is giving an overview of all the area, the coastal area, 28,346 hectares, and then almost a similar amount in the Tonle Sap Basin. Tonle Sap is one of the largest lakes in Southeast Asia, and it fluctuates in level, basically fed by the flood peak coming down the Mekong system. It's off the side and basically Southeast Asia's largest lake. But with that fluctuating water level, as we normally know with systems that fluctuate water level a lot, you don't tend to get such peat formation, because as the water level drops, then it will dry out and the peat can oxidize. But we have found quite significant amounts, particularly between the Great Lake system, the main lake, and the main Mekong River, along the swamps along there. But there are also patches or pockets around the main lake itself, particularly in areas which seem to be more permanently waterlogged. So a total of 56,982 hectares have been discovered. That's from the remote sensing mapping. For the coastal peat, we've more or less verified all of them detected by remote sensing were in fact there, delineation correct. But for the Tonle Sap Lake Basin peat, we're still looking at that. You can see here some mapping example. You can see the Great Lake here, Tonle Sap Lake here, and that large concentration are basically in between the lake and the main Mekong River system. And this river is quite unique during flood season. In fact, flows upstream and fills the lake up. But also, since we've done this map, we're also identifying some peat in this northwestern corner of the lake system. So you can see the zoom in to one of the patches. This is on the outflow river from the Tonle Sap, and you can see in sort of discrete blocks of peat, but with a range of river channels around it. So in between the river channels flowing out of the Tonle Sap, and then along the main river channel of the Mekong River, you're also seeing a lot of the back swamps. And these are probably where the sediment deposit along the main channel has raised up the levee banks, and then you created these freshwater wetland areas behind the main river levee banks where peat formation has taken place. So the third area is upland peatlands. We're still not undertaken the detailed field survey. Most of the remote sensing we were doing during the COVID lockdown, so we had plenty of time to do satellite analysis, but we've not yet been able to do the field survey. But we've identified about 5,300 hectares of organic soil based on our remote sensing analysis, of which we think maybe 2,000 hectares are likely to be classified as peat, but we really need to go in and look at the depth and the nature of the peat. So these are basically in the montane areas on the eastern boundary of Cambodia to Vietnam. So we hope to undertake ground surveys in the relatively near future to verify this. And this, looking at the upland peat, this has been supported through the MAPSA program, and we'll talk a little bit more about. There'll be some sessions tomorrow, also with the new SAGU project, which is under development with support from Germany, where one of the focus is to look at these upland peat in Southeast Asia and to see the special nature of that. For most of the peat mapping, and I think the peat mapping that we've seen on the global atlas really is undercounting the upland peat. Certainly in Southeast Asia, all the focus has been on the lowland peat and very little on the upland peat. And the more we're looking, we're finding quite significant upland peat areas. So I think with that, just to conclude that I think that with the right remote sensing tool, and we did have to train our analysis, basically because for the mangrove peat, it was very unusual. So it was not known at all before, not documented, and what will be the signature. So we were thinking it could possibly be, but we were really uncertain until we did the field survey. Once we had done the field survey and verified that, then we were able to use that learning to train the program for analyzing the further images. So then it was relatively easy to map out all the remaining peatland along the coast. So as I said, 70% of the coastal mangrove in Cambodia have got the peat deposits. So I think that's a very interesting. And then for the inland, again, they were not recognized or documented at all, even though some of the ones we found is like 10 or 20 kilometers from the capital city, but no one had documented it or classified it as peat before. So this is, I mean, challenge in many countries where peat like is the missing, as people said before, the Cinderella story, that it's missing. It's classified as something else, as a freshwater swamp or as a floodplain or as something else, but not picked out as peat ecosystem. So I think this approach can be a quite cost-effective way to do assessment, particularly in countries where there's difficulty of access. We've also done some remote sensing in Myanmar, where the local on-the-ground situation at the moment is precluding much field survey, and we're also identifying quite significant areas of peatlands there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for sharing this potentially very interesting and exciting discovery. So, any questions?
Hello, thank you. Örjan Berglund from Agriculture University in Sweden. Also trying to do some mapping in Sweden. It's much easier, I think. But were there any agriculture on peatlands, organic soils? And also we had this talk about the frontiers and the discrepancy between the central state and local people. Did you find that the local people had their own classification that could identify peat soils because they had identified it, even though it wasn't really recognized by the government? Whatever.
Yeah. I think the mangrove area, no agriculture, but there was aquaculture. So there was some portion which were dug up for prawn ponds or fish pond. From the interaction with the local community, we didn't get any clear understanding because maybe it's just such a unique situation, but to the local people, this is how it is. Because many of the mangrove area around the community have this organic material. So maybe they thought that was usual for the mangrove to have like that, whereas for anyone else, this would be very, very unusual. But we didn't pick up, as far as I know, any specific name or other thing. And when we discussed with the local government, even the province government at the time, again, there was no knowledge. But I think one of the problems is peatland often is no word in local language for these systems, particularly when it's never been recorded in the country. I mean, there's no knowledge of that. So that is a barrier to that.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Such a presentation. So one simple question is, when you identify the peatland, is it possible to quality the air of the depth of the peat? I don't know the specific method is the most
Just in terms of I mean, basically for the definition we're using, although other parts of Southeast Asia, we have there's a formal definition by the government, like Indonesia, Malaysia, we're using a higher proportion of organic matter. We use 65% organic matter and at least 50 centimeter of organic matter layer to have peat. But for the Mekong region, the northern part of Southeast Asia, we tend to be using basically the FAO definition, which is 40 centimeter in the top, 80 centimeter of the soil. And some of the peat site we're getting in the inland area where there's some erosion, you're getting some mineral soil maybe laid on top of the peat. So it may be slightly buried under a mineral layer, but it still has a 40 centimeter in the top, 80 centimeter of the soil profile. And we're also using the FAO definition of the organic matter, that it may be between 20 to 30%, depending on the sand, the clay mix. So we tend to use the organic soil definition of FAO for mapping. But having said, we can see the pictures there in the mangrove, actually very little mineral content. It's like 98% organic matter. So it's a very, very high content, but we're still not clear on the origin. For the ones in the Tonle Sap Lake Basin, because those are frequently flooded with sediment-rich water, then I believe they have a higher mineral content.
We'll have next question.
Thanks, Taizhou. Great presentation. I don't know if anyone noticed on the GPI global map, Papua New Guinea, and the only reference on that map were to the lowland peatlands. There was absolutely no reference whatsoever to the whole central belt of the highland, the upland peatlands. So I think this experience, Taizhou, will be extremely useful in helping us in this new SAGL project funded by ICI, that also funded GPI. So it'll be very useful. Thank you.
We also found recent new upland peat in Malaysia as well in the last 6 months. So definitely there's a lot out there, but not well documented.
But there are people there with the bamboo in the sky, right? So,
Yeah, absolutely.
so any other questions from audience? questions from audience remotely? All right. Thank you again. Our next presentation by Professor Hans Josten from University Greifswald. And the title of his presentation is Global Peatland Diversity and Carbon Stock. So I'm going to do that remotely. So please welcome Hans for his presentation.
Yeah, good afternoon to all of you. Yes, I want to tell you a little bit about global peatland diversity and carbon stock. First, take a look at the diversity of the most important characteristic of peatlands. Peatlands are, of course, lands with peat. But we see that there are differences in the types of peat that are deposited all over the world. It is first important to recognize that not all species, not all plant species produce peat. Peat is a substance in which macrofossils of plants are conserved, but not all plants have robust tissue that is conserved in peat. For example, in Europe, we know that less than 1% of the plant species indeed contribute to peat formation. And that is similar in the entire world. But if you look at the distribution and the type of peat over the world, we recognize actually that there are three types, very coarse types of peat. When you are in the northern part of the world, in the northern Arctic, in the boreal and the oceanic temperate zone, it are specifically mosses that contributed to peat formation. Mosses, specifically, of course, peat mosses, Sphagnacea, but also all kinds of brown mosses that play an important role. And they contribute to peat formation by their stems, their branches, and their leaves. This has to do with the fact that the evapotranspiration in these areas compared to the precipitation is rather low. And as a result, peat formation is possible close to the surface. If you are going, however, more to the south, where the climate becomes drier, and that also accounts for continental zones, when you are in the temperate zone and you go more into the continent, then you see that other species, specifically reeds and sedges, so specific halophyte growth form, take over of specific families, like the grass family, the sedge family, the equisetum family, and also grass-like families like Restuarinaceae in the southern hemisphere. And it is as if these plants dive away from the dangers of the atmosphere, the evapotranspiration demand that is threatening the water level. And as a result, their peat production happens by rootlets and radicels, small rootlets, or rhizomes. The peat formation is underground. And this process goes even further when you are in the lowlands of the tropics. There you see that the main peat formation is happening by trees. Trees from various plant families, Dipterocarpaceae in Southeast Asia, but also palms are very important in South America. And you see there that specifically deep-rooting roots contribute to peat formation. That is not the only way of peat formation. We have also a very interesting type of peat formation by what we call tip-up pools, trees that fall over and create deep pools by their roots that are filled up with above ground material. But also in the tropics, most of the peat formation happens by below ground plant components. And then you have a special zone that is the southern antiboreal, subantarctic, extremely oceanic zone, where we have special plants, but it are more the structure of plants, not so much the families that are typical. They make very hard plants. We call them cushion plants. You can drive with a bicycle over these types of peatlands. And actually a lot of different families create such plant types. And there also the roots in this aggressive climate play the most important role with respect to peat formation. If you look at the types of peatland, so the different functionalities of peatlands, how they come into being, how they accumulate peat as a exponent of landscape processes, we also see big differences in the types of peatlands over the world. In the Arctic, permafrost plays an important role. There we have permanent permafrost. Actually, the smallest peatlands that we have identified are the bird tops, and they are only a few or up to even 1 meter in diameter, but they really produce peat over centuries. It's only a few square meters. But in the rest of the Arctic, the peat formation is specifically by a permafrost-induced ice wedge development that creates low center polygons and high center polygons, highly patterned peatland types. Highly patterned peatland types we find also in the subarctic and the boreal, where we have, for example, the beautiful APA, the string mayas, or palsa mayas, mayas with a permafrost nucleus, but surrounded by non-permafrost ground. They create specific forms. This patterning you also find still explicitly in the temperate zone, like the example I included here from a raised bog in Argentina, in the southern part of Argentina, Tierra del Fuego. But in the temperate zone, when they are very wet, you find so-called blanket bogs, peat deposits that covers the entire landscape, go over mountains and valleys like a blanket. That's why we call them blanket bogs. And another specific type for the temperate zone, which are also present in China, but that have suffered very much from drainage by agriculture, are the so-called percolation fens. They only occur when there is a constant supply of groundwater. In the tropics, as I said, the trees are the most important peat formers in the lowland tropics. Here an example of a Shorea albida swamp in Brunei, where you find up to 60 meters high trees on 20 meters deep peat. In South America, also trees play an important role, and a special plant species that is very important in South America is Mauritia. If you are not in the real lowlands, but a little bit higher, like in large parts of Africa, then you see again that this temperate continental aspect becomes prevalent in the form of reeds, and specifically papyrus, which is an important peatland former. High mountains are very special because you have all kinds of climate zones dependent on altitude. And there we find actually back very typical peatland types of the higher zones on the world, but also very typical peatlands that are subject to intensive ultraviolet radiation and create adapted plants like these Espalicia mayas in the Andes or Dendrosenecia mayas in Africa, in Uganda. The most extensive highland peatlands are found in China, in the Tibetan Plateau, specifically around Uruguay. And then you have a very special southern temperate antiboreal subantarctic zone, which hardly exists because there is hardly any land on these latitudes. But where there is land, you have very abundant peat and peatlands with special, very special expressions, like the button grass moorlands in Tasmania, the Astelia bogs in Argentina, and also on Amsterdam Island in the subantarctic, you find very special sphagnum species that produce peat. And then over the world, we have peatland types, specifically what we call terrestrialization mires and waterized mires that you can find everywhere where there is a constant presence of water. These mires include mires in Iran or in Kazakhstan, and very important, like Faisal also has expressed, are the mangrove mires that might be originally peat forming or that growing over already existing peatlands. We have recently cored from the Greifswald Maya Center up to 12 meters of peat under mangroves in Belize, for example. So here you see a map of the distribution of the species richness. In former sheets, I have showed you something about the peat diversity and about the peatland type diversity. But of course, peatlands are also platforms of the growing of species. So even when only a small percentage of the plant species produce peat, there are a lot of plant species and even more animal species who live in and from this matrix. But you see also that there is a very typical distribution of peatland biodiversity. The northern hemisphere is anyhow rather poor in species. That does not only account for the peatlands, but it is generally so. This is a rather homogeneous area, and we call that the Holarctic, the northern area in North America and in Northern Europe and Northern Asia. This is the area with the largest concentration of peatlands, but the species richness specifically of plants is not that large. And similarly with other diversity, you find also the highest diversity of peatland species in the tropics. But if you look at this map, a very coarse map, you see also some exceptions. Exceptions, for example, in mountainous areas. The Andes is incredibly rich in peatland species. But also, for example, you see the Caribbean and the southeastern part of North America. These are exceptional areas because these are subtropical areas, and the subtropics are actually rather poor in peatlands. But there are areas, specifically at the east of the continent, where actually the land masses dive under the ocean air masses and get extra water, and you have very wet areas in these eastern subtropic continental areas. The example that I want to point out is the Caribbean and Southeast USA, Okefenokee Swamp, for example, which will get today and tomorrow 600 to 900 millimeters of rainfall. There is an enormous amount of rainfall, which is very abnormal for the subtropics. And these areas often have also fire, and these areas have a very high also peatland species biodiversity. The same accounts, for example, for areas in eastern Madagascar, and also to some extent a part of eastern China. So here the hotspot at a map of species diversity shows you where you can find the most important hotspots of peatland biodiversity. It is important to recognize that we have these various levels, organizational levels of diversity, peatland types, and peatland species, and they might differentiate in different species. So whereas the northern hemisphere is rather poor relatively in peatland species, there are countries where you have a lot of peatland types. It is no wonder that large countries like Canada or Russia and also China to some extent have very many peatland types because they cover many climate zones. And peatland types are largely determined by climatic conditions. So you must recognize that peatland diversity may be independent of species diversity. And that may even go so far, like we have discovered in Tierra del Fuego, that you may have a very poor species diversity and a very rich genetic diversity and a very rich peatland type diversity. So the various types of diversity on various organizational levels is not identical over the world, which is important when you develop conservation strategies. Some last word about the carbon stock. Yeah, the information about carbon stocks is even poorer, we must say, than the information about peatland distribution. Peatland distribution we can to some extent recognize from the surface. But peatland carbon stock, the amount of peat volume there are, you also need additional information about peatland depth, how deep, how many meters, decimeters you can find, and of course about the carbon content of the peat. The carbon content of the peat is not so diverse, but dependent, of course, on water content. It might be very different. Some orders between very wet peatlands and very compacted peatlands. But the depth can be very different. We have no possibility to really predict the depth. I have myself cored peatlands of a few square meters in diameters, but meters deep. And there are peatlands that are tens and hundreds square kilometers with only shallow peat layers. So from the surface, you cannot see the peat depth, and you really have to core. And that is, of course, the bottleneck, because we have very many peatlands that have not been surveyed sufficiently to say how much peat and how much peat carbon is there. But there are some estimates. We anyhow know that peatlands belong to the most carbon-rich ecosystems of the terrestrial biosphere. You find in no ecosystem types more carbon per hectare than in a peatland. That has simply to do with the fact that this carbon is in the peat. If you recognize that a peat layer of 15 centimeter thickness has already the same carbon content as a lower tropical rainforest, then you understand how important peatlands are for the carbon stock. But as I said, we cannot very accurately estimate this carbon stock yet. The estimates that we now use are in the order of magnitude of 600,000 megaton or 650, 600 gigaton, plus or minus 100 gigaton. So it is not very accurate. It is clear that the northern hemisphere, the northern peatlands, contain most of the peat carbon, but substantial amounts are found in the tropics. And in the tropics, the knowledge about peatlands is continuously expanding. And in the southern peatlands, there is not so much carbon for the simple reason that there is so little land and therefore also so little carbon and peat. So for many countries, we do not know the concrete volumes of peat available. From some countries, they have been investigated rather well. And we can use this information to extrapolate a little bit towards countries of which we have no idea about peat occurrence and peat carbon occurrence. And that works to some extent. And that feeds also in these estimates. But you will understand that the estimates of peatland carbon stock are still preliminary and still have to be improved. In the global peatland assessment, you find a lot of information, but if you have already recognized that more and more countries and peoples and groups are making inventories of peatlands. So our knowledge about peatland carbon stocks and also peatland diversity will rapidly increase in future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and for sharing your extensive encyclopedia knowledge about peatland. So you are really a living legend of all things peatland. So any questions for Hans? For 6 or
Hello, Herr Houston. Guten Tag. I have
Hello.
one question. How come that there is the region of Greenland is more or less a blank on the map? Because I thought Greenland is where it's supposed to be green, or it used to be.
Yeah, Greenland has, of course, only peat in the marginal zones where there are no glaciers. And the big majority of Greenland is covered by ice, and where there is ice, there is no peat.
Any other question? Any question for hands online? So audience remotely? Let me check the chat. So last time I forgot to check this, maybe I did it from Alex, so I'll comment on the last time. Yeah. Any question for Hans? Other questions? All right. Hans, thank you very much, Hans. Yeah.
My pleasure.
So I think there are bottled water at the back of the room, so you can grab the water. I think we keep going and finish the global peatland section, or take a break. What do you think? One more, yeah. So the next presentation is on the global state of peatland, and by let's see, this by Chengyu and myself. So I'm going to do three, a moderator and also three presentations. So really appreciate Patrick for putting all the slides together. So I was in the field a few days ago, and then came to the Congress here. So it was a busy day yesterday as well. So the best thing I can do, just read the note, actually, Patrick, a very detailed and useful note put together by Patrick. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Okay, so this is about the global state of peatland and the hotspot of value and the driver of change. So this is status of global peatland. So around 12% of world peatland are degraded, primarily due to intensive agricultural activity. And we can see that around 50% of European peatland are green, with Asia in second place with about 15% of green peatland.
Sorry, excuse me, Sigen, sorry to interrupt, but we're not seeing the slides. Could you put them in presentation mode and also change them?
So what was that? Let me see.
Can we put them in presentation mode?
Oh, yeah, I'm using the presentation note, yeah.
Okay, because we are not seeing the presentation mode. We're seeing the PowerPoint open slides.
What was that?
But it's
Yeah,
fine. Now we're on the second slide, so as long as you change the slides, it's also okay.
Oh, okay, sure. Now, can you see it now?
It's not in presentation mode, but we can see the second slide.
Can you show the presentation note? Yeah, share and use the share already. Okay. No. 我要那个就是写。How about now, Patrick? You can see the slide, right?
Yeah, but it's not in presentation mode, or maybe it's loading. But yeah, you can keep going as long as we change the slides, even if it's not in presentation mode. Sorry, thank you.
Okay. All right, yeah, so yeah, I'll keep going. Yeah, so this is, so globally, 12% aggregate and mostly in Europe. So regarding global greenhouse gas emission coming from peatland, there are approximately 2,000 megatons CO2 emission annually coming from global degraded peatland without counting peat fire. So that is 4% of the total global anthropogenic greenhouse gas emission. So the amount every year from degraded peatland account for 4%. And so with this 25 countries accounting for 85% of global peatland emission, coming from a green peatland area used for agriculture, forestry, and peat extraction, where we can see that Indonesia played the biggest role with approximately of 668 megatons of CO2 emission annually. And globally, 52% of global greenhouse gas emission from degraded peatland coming from Asia. So a major source of greenhouse gas emissions come from Asia peatland. So for various countries, peatland emission constitutes a considerable proportion of the total national emission, like shown in this figure, this map, illustrating the relevance of urgency to include peatland and their emission in their nationally determined contribution, so NDC. So it's predicted that if emission from a degraded peatland, green peatland continue to be released at the same rate, at this rate until 2100, the end of this century, they will consume 41% of greenhouse gas emission budget. That still remain to keep global warming below 1.5 degrees, and that will be a 12% of global greenhouse gas emission budget if remain to keep under below +2 degrees. So the idea is, if you consider the contribution from degraded peatland and with everything else, so if you want to control warming below 1.5 degrees, and that amount, almost like small half of the total greenhouse gas emission budget, which you allow. If you do that, and you can keep that warming, a limited warming. So the hotspot value of what's called natural contribution to people. So NCP, peatland provide a wide range of natural contribution to people, and the ecosystem service, they play an essential role in addressing the triple planetary crisis. So mitigating climate change through carbon sequestration. So hence talk about the carbon stock in peatland just a few minutes ago, and purifying water and cycling nutrients to combat water pollution, and preventing air pollution by avoiding burning of green peatland. So especially in tropical Indonesia, so we know this is a major issue, environmental issue, and serving as a sanctuary that's unique about diversity. So peatland provide an important ecosystem service. The peatland have contributed to cooling the climate by about 26 degrees during the Holocene, so the last 12,000 years or so, by sequestering CO2 and storing carbon for millennia. So peatland provide material good like water and food. So they also provide the non-material contribution to people who live near them. So particularly the local people, local community often holding the sacred meaning and the cultural value. It's important to note that society, particularly indigenous one, have interacted with peatland for thousands of years, and depending upon them for vital good. So that's the important hotspot change driver. The main direct anthropogenic driver of change in peatland is drainage for agriculture and forestry, so afforestation. So because peatland wetland, you need water, you need a high water table, stable water table. This is a major problem. Other threats facing peatland include road construction, reservoir creation, oil sand mining, overgrazing, and pollution. So, different part of the world has different degree, those human disturbance, the human impact. So climate change is an indirect anthropogenic driver of peatland degradation, particularly in area with extensive permafrost. And so permafrost thawing and where wildfire are becoming more common. So the high northern latitude, so it's a major concern. So Europe is a global degradation hotspot because of a widespread land use change to agriculture, forestry, and peat extraction. Because of long history, so 200-year history, peat use. And then next to Europe, major hotspots are Northeast China, Southeast Asia. So Northeast China mostly, I think, for agricultural use, so reclamation. So the figure above show the high human impact and degradation hotspot on peatland, mainly driven by agriculture, or the figure below show the peatland area where low impact prevails, mostly in the some high altitude. Yeah. So the GPA, Global Peatland Assessment, has also produced a map of peatland located within and outside the protected area, using world database on protected area, so WDPA. So WDPA is the most comprehensive global database on terrestrial and marine protected area. A wide range of data providers, including governmental and non-governmental organizations, help to compile the WDPA, which accept data on protected area as defined by IUCN and CBD. So the map shows that in Asia and North America, only a small proportion of peatland are protected. So ratio on other continents are somewhere in between. However, even if peatland are located in protected area, this does not mean that they are in a good condition. Nor does it mean that they are actively managed or restored. So most peatland are not protected, so as to say, reserve or protected area. So this again, same list of the resources available on Global Peatland Assessment, and also the database and the map. So some map you can download, and other you can kind of interactive online map. You can play around and so on. So this is the summary of global chapter of the Global Peatland Assessment. So, and any questions?
I have a basic question about the definition. When you talk about the drained peatland and also degraded peatland, are there any difference or is it necessary differentiation?
Yeah, degradation or degraded peatland is a kind of general term. So drained peatland, I think just lower water table, and mostly for agriculture and for forestry. So it's one specific damage or disturbance. So I think that's it.
If the drained peatland is producing very well, we classify it as degraded peatland.
Yeah, I think so. I don't remember. So anybody online has a comment on that? So how we define it, what degree we consider as a degraded peatland? Anybody? Heather, you remember? Right. Obviously, there's different degree of degradation, right? So and that in compared to the impact that sometimes we say so in natural state, right? You have a comment about that?
I was just referring to that large areas of oil palm plantations, which I'm not sure you classify as degraded.
Any
Degraded.
any other question, comment?
So formally, slide, I didn't really find the data of the greenhouse emission for the South America. So I don't know what happened. That means the data isn't available, or the percentage is so low.
So we talk a lot about, greenhouse gas emission coming from Asia, right? Especially Indonesia, is that right? So I think not, I don't think there no emission, but just we highlight the most, most greenhouse gas emission from definitely peatland of the come from, I think 50%, right? Global come from globally 2,000 megaton per year. I think if I remember correctly, 800 something 86 megaton from Indonesia, and together with other Asian countries in Asia, account for 52%. The other 48% of greenhouse gas emissions from definitely different come from the other continents. For Central and South America. So maybe you want to check the Peatland assessment, the report itself, to see if there are specific information, reference citation related to the information. So in order to get a global estimate of probably we have some information. So different degree of uncertainty. Did that answer your question?
From that map, it's simply not exact map for the emissions from the peatland for the whole area, or include the other ecosystem that map.
I think on the we'll go back to the map is for delegate peatland, right? So it's not from, I don't believe from all other ecosystem. So no, right? So this is from peatland.
Just something from the map. Actually, the map was comparing emission estimated from peatland. There was a separate graph about which country with more emission, and comparing it, the proportion compared to the national emission from fossil fuel or other things. And if you saw what was interesting, the countries with the highest level were particularly in Africa, where they have a very low emission from fossil fuel. So therefore, the peatland it was in the 10 to 50% category. Same with Indonesia was 10 to 50% category, Malaysia. But other countries, I think the Latin America, one is the fossil fuel emission is higher from industry and other sources. Secondly, there is much, maybe less information on the status of drainage. Because, for example, the Brazil peatland area has only very recently been greatly expanded, and with Peru and so on, in the last few years, those have been identified, and those are still, many of them identified are relatively intact. For Brazil, the big peatland area, which was drained long ago, much of that already totally destroyed. The Atlantic forest peat, much of the peat has already been emitted earlier, so it's not picked up in the emission calculation. But I think still for South America generally, there is not very good data on the drainage and emission factor, and it's not included in most of the national report to the climate change convention. They're not self-reporting that information, so that's a big challenge.
Thank you for the clarification. So yeah, if people need bottled water, that's where we have bottled water, and then so yeah, I think coffee break around. Yeah, I just checked. I'm not sure the we take let's say 10-minute break, so come back at 3:15, please. Yeah.
Yeah. And the lot there excluding the fire emission. Obviously, this is a natural perturbation or something, and they don't put it in their report. And we can see values, but they are not active.
Well, that's good.
No. 一般那个胡老师那个
That's the worrying trend of the future. Yeah.
You will take 10 minutes, 15 minutes break, we'll come back to 3:15.
Yeah. Thank you, Sihen. Can you hear me, Sihen?
Yeah, quite a large number of audience actually, you know. Spending so, you know.
And you go very strong. I'm not certain what the answer, so it's not correctly maybe not interested with the team, the mapping team. Alexandra, spoke about the mapping team, they're the ones collecting the data. Basically, they have a global data set that's been running for the last 10, 15 years. Basically, each area overlaid with drainage map, the drain peak area using emission factors for the drain peak area, basically IPCC or other methods to calculate projected, so it's not all measured. It's based on emission factor and activity data. But sometimes the measurement is higher than the emission factor, something lower, something varies with. I think people is missing. Many of the global models, climate models, incorporated so the gap. On the fringe is the workers have posted. Yeah. So the big fires I think when the ice is active between whatever peak may have been under there, it's partial or release or whatever. It's there. Yeah. Most likely it's where the ice is really
如果参与我一般的这个上山的一个作为我有点数，但不是太多，不知道没什么要求，给我信息。现在收了一个德国的数据。其他在弄这一部分啊，先就是关注更深入一些，实在基本都在打。是之后，大家的这种没这样，我会比较里面信息，然后没看到那个新闻讲的啊，没问题，没有问题，我是刘老师，好嘞，先走啊，好。学习。 啊，我刚才说我不知道，你刚才讲的那个对，这两个。
有感也是性骚扰的。
后来是拿下华人。
Hello, Siheng. Before we start, can we test the screen sharing? Because during your presentation, we weren't able to see when you were changing slides.
Yeah, okay, yeah. PPT. Can you see the slide now, Patrick?
So no, right now we don't see any shared screen.
Yeah, we try. Yeah, we'll try to share the slide now. Right now.
Yeah, so we can see the slides, but they are not in presentation mode. And the problem is that when you are, I guess that in your screen, you're seeing the full screen. And when you change slides, we don't see that the slides change.
Not in presentation mode here. Right.
Presentation was not. Yeah, wait. Right now.
No, we still see the all of the slides. Yeah, now we see the presentation mode. And can you go through the slides forward?
But
Go to the note.
yeah,
Yes, now we can see them. Perfect.
Yeah, so set up the
people
flow.
cannot see. Oh, okay. Wait one moment.
Yeah.
How about now?
How about now, Patrick?
Yes, but now we can see the notes.
Still
Do you mind?
We can't see the note.
Do you really mind to see the note? No, never. I do. Yeah, it's beautiful, but.
Maybe also we should move the screen closer, closer the background comes.
No, online people want.
Many people.
Yeah. So the online people want to stay there, they will slide and move it, but they other.
Yeah, I know, but whether the screen should come closer, because that we cannot, even the front row, after we.
Oh, you mean you want to move
Move
it
the
around?
screen so that these people
Yeah.
should not.
No, it's not already, there's always the on the cable.
There's a thing. Is that better for those in the room?
Better?
It's not. Patrick?
Yeah, we can see the slide in slideshow, so it looks good.
Okay, yeah, now in order, yeah, so. But it's. Yeah, so now, we'll move on to the second part of the global peatland assessment session on Asian peatland. So the first presentation by Professor Zhao Junfu from Northeast Normal University. The title of presentation is Asia Peatland Distribution, Value, and Change. So let's welcome Professor Tu.
Thank you, Professor Yu. Good afternoon to everyone here. I'm so happy to be here to give a speech on Asia peatland. And actually, I just get this order, get this procedure, had this task 3 days ago. So it's a little bit hard for me to prepare that very well. But hope you can understand me very well. I will try my best. Okay. When look at the Asia part peatland, actually there is quite special part scenes on Asia peatlands. Firstly, we can see it. So most intense population in Asia part, and also you can see here that our peatland are the biggest all the whole world. So our data here is 161 million hectares. Compared to whole the world number. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I don't think it's my presentation here. So again to, sorry, it's not here.
That you.
刚才你跑过来，看看，不是这样，我给你的，用那个。Sorry,
we updated
1 minute maybe.
PowerPoint file. We updated the PowerPoint file and we're going to get a better presentation.
我们这里对抗的是有好的技术的原因。对啊，这个check that。好了，那我就用这个。对，还得用那个，不用那个，现在就可以用上。我帮你看。Hi Patrick, can you see that?
No, we cannot see any slides.
Close it.
Yeah. Let me get a better experience.
Yes, we can see the slides and the camera looks better. Thank you.
Really sorry about that. Actually, I worked for 2 nights to modify my PPT, but right now it's gone. I couldn't use that anymore. So sorry about that. I gave you so many times. Hope I can make some improvements. Maybe you can get better information on that. Okay. So look at the data here. So actually, I made a calculation. Our peatland area accounts for 1/3 of all the world peatlands. So how about the current percentage about to the region surface area is about 3.7. For the whole world, it's 3.8%. About degradation, almost same. Whereas 30, I remember, should be 13.8. And undegraded area, 87%. It seems good. Our in Asia, our peatland conserved, not very bad. It's okay. About the country, top countries with large area. The first one is Asia part, Russia. Second one is Indonesia. Third, China, followed by Mongolia. And in the world, Indonesia is the second one. But the fifth one, China is the 7th. And we have another additional data. The total carbon stocks, the 182,000 billion tons. carbon here. And we have many endangered species, including 20 vulnerable species, 25 endangered, and 13 critically endangered species. Also, flora, we have many species should be protected. And about conservation, we have 71 peatlands are included in a list in Ramsar wetland science. For the percentage, it's around 18%. For the world, should be much more, around 26 or 25. So that means we have many peatlands should be conserved. We have big gap for that conservation. If I look at the percentage, yeah, I have another data but not shown here. For the greenhouse gas emission, our emission is 52%. That's quite large. This is distribution. If we look at ecological zones, you can find the orange zone is the most part for peatland distribution in Asia. It's comes to for 47%. Second one is tropic. The third one is the polar area, mainly Russia part. And temperate zone, 12%. And other areas are 5%. And look at the country. For the polar and boreal part, it's Russia, and little part, a small part, China, in northeast China. And temperate steppe, only Mongolia. And the temperate region, we have a mountain continental area, mainly China, Japan. For subtropical area, we also have some peatlands, mainly in China. It's a humid forest and also continental forest. In China, we have many peatlands right now in middle China part. They are most of them distributed in mountain area. Also in tropic area, Indonesia and Bangladesh, many countries, India have a peatland over there. I talk about hotspots of value. First one, diversity. In Asia part, just like as used to be talked before, many species should be protected. It's mainly in South part, South Asia, Southeast Asia. In Southeast Asia, there are 1,024 plant species. Most of them are including bryophytes, forest, fungal species. Okay, and tropical area, there's a lot of mammals, 123, 168 birds, and 218 freshwater fish species. And peat swamp also scored 23% to 32% all species of mammals and birds in Malaysia and Borneo. And nature's contribution to people, material contribution. I remember in 2000 years in Canada meeting, they talked about that the chairman told us you can enjoy the food everywhere from wetlands here. Yeah, that means wetlands, especially peatlands, contributes a lot of material to us. So in total, now 1,376 plant species in South Asia have been identified in peat swamp forest, and around 39% of which are used for timber, medicine, food, and other purposes. And the timber products and the non-timber forest products also apply here. In Indonesia, local women clean and selling mats from Pura, sage plants in peat swamps. particularly in China, we have many people living on peatlands, living from many plant resources, such as aromatics, such as blueberries. Efforts to reconcile biomass production and peatland conservation have created interest in horticulture, the production and use of biomass of wet and wet peatlands. And the boreal and polar region peatland provide many areas like that of mushroom, reindeer herding area. Also, some from, especially from Russia part, a lot of reindeer grazing over there is quite popular. Actually, here I should show you some pictures. They're quite nice. Anyway, so about nature's contribution to people, non-material contributions. Many people, native people have developed place-based knowledge and beliefs about peatlands. And about regulating contribution, one of the largest peat carbon pools in Asia is found in the boreal peatlands of Asia, Russia, storing an estimated 2,100 million tons and 96,000 million tons as dead wood and soil carbon, respectively. Analysis of peat cores can reveal insight on past vegetation changes, hydrological and climate conditions, and the impact of human activities. When intact, peatlands are essentially hydrologically self-regulated, maintaining high water table level during drought seasons and preventing floods during the rainy season. About Northeast China. So many peatlands distributed in China are, most of them from Northeast China. And also we have another distributed area in the Southwest, is Tibet area. So it's in Northeast part of China, the peatland distributed from the Northwest to Southeast, including Great Hangan, Small Hangan, and the China Mountain. In Southeast Asia, many peatlands are conserved within the boundary at least 26 per hectare area located here, and including Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam. They store massive amounts of carbon in their biomass and peat soils and provide critical habitat for rare and endangered species. South Asia, peatlands not much, but along this area, including Bay of Bengal and the Arabian area, Bay here, including Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. So I talk about change, peatland change. Just like Professor Yu and also Hans talked about CO2 or greenhouse gas emission from peatlands. Indonesia in Asia is the first one emission a lot of CO2 every year. I think because peat use and fire. And second one followed by China and Malaysia, involved in India. The main degree reason, first one is drainage. If we look at the country here, in North Korea, the population is highest. It's nearly more than 85, 84 around here. And India, Bangladesh, Malaysia, Japan, Indonesia, and the last one, Brunei. So for Central Asia, the key threat to highland peatland of Central Asia is overgrazing, such as Mongolia, such as Tibet, in Northern Asia, the main reason is climate change. And in permafrost thawing is widespread. And in northeast China, especially China mountains, there's a cultivation such as rice, corn cultivation. It's a main reason for the peatland degradation. In Southeast Asia, logging, drainage, and conversion to industry plantations, agriculture, and recurrent fires are the main direct drivers of peatland degradation. And also infrastructures and housing development, oil production, peat mining here are also degraded peatlands. Such situation is also happening in China. Okay, this is what I can talk with this. Sorry. Thank you.
Any question for? I appreciate the presentation, Dr. Wu. I would like to inform you a new reference of Indonesian peatland. The one that you had was based on Peatland International in 2003 and 2006. But there have been publication afterwards, and the most recent one is 2021 by NDA in Geoderma. And the peatland estimate based on the publication is about 13.5 million hectares. So you may want to refer to it. Thank you.
Yes, actually, in our group, we talk about peatland area in the initial part a lot. Actually, we have different definition for the depths, especially. Actually, I mean, for this application, you have
13.4 million.
34.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a public published in Athena, 2018. Yeah. Geoderma also Geoderma. Okay. So actually, we use the main data from Kahina, from Dr. Xu Jinyuan.
Yeah.
But
we are from the survey group. Like friend here is the surveyor.
Okay.
And most of sub-page publications based on review. So
yes. Yeah, maybe I can now give you more comments on that. Okay.
For the Indonesian side, this chapter we have another lead author, Pak Daniel. Pak Daniel is leading on this chapter, and then we are kind of like supporting authors. For this information, the peatland distribution in Indonesia, we basically using the C4 data, is a 20 million hectare. That we also include this information into ASEAN document that already endorsed by the Indonesian government. So the information that we have 14-point-something million hectare from Peatland Directorate basically is a peatland hydrological unit, include the peatland and non-peat areas. So we refer to the existing information that we have at the moment. But of course, we basically agree that more site-based assessment needed to be done, and then to share the information more broadly and openly, so that from the research group we can find the information more accurately. Thank you.
Can I add? Yeah, so the earlier version was based on remote sensing, and with time we have more access to the land, and we have the direct auger of the peatland, so we know that it is peatland or not. So so it's publicly available in Geoderma 2021.
Any question? Another question? Any question from audience remotely? Thank you, Professor Fu, and we'll move on to the next part.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Taizhou again, and from Global Environmental Center, and the topic, the title is Asian Peatland, the Hotspot of Response. Please welcome Taizhou for the second talk.
Okay, can the online people see the full screen presentation?
Yes, yes, thank you, Faisal.
Okay, thank you. So what I'm aiming to do is to give some of the information drawn from the chapter, the Asia chapter from the Global Peatland Assessment, but to give some additional illustration or elaboration. So I hope this version includes that changes. So I think you've seen the map just now in the presentation, but I'm going to be particularly focusing on the Southeast Asia region, because I think other presentation we will have will add some more about China and the North Asia situation. So just peatlands in Southeast Asia cover approximately 23 million hectares, and they're very have multiple functions. So naturally, the peatlands in Southeast Asia are almost all forested, those in the lowland regions, and very critical for water supply and flood prevention and prevention of saline intrusion. They're also extremely high biodiversity with high endemism, especially for blackwater fish species. We have many newly described, more than 13 new species of fish described in the last 20, 30 years, including the world's smallest vertebrate. One fish at maturity is 7 millimeters long, and it can survive within the peat, even not in the water body. In the body of the peat, it can survive. So peatlands in Southeast Asia also very significant for community livelihoods. I guess you all know, or you don't know, the chewing gum tree, or gelatong, the world's best chewing gum from this tree. So it's similar latex to rubber, but indigenous to the peatland forests of Southeast Asia, and is a significant income to rural communities. But the degradation of peatlands also has a very significant impact to local communities in Southeast Asia. So as various speakers have mentioned earlier, there has been significant degradation through drainage and particularly fires in Southeast Asia, which has a big regional impact. And smoke from peatland fires affected more than 50 million people in Southern Asia and has left losses between 100 to 300 billion US dollars. Very significant environmental, social, economic impacts from the peatland fires. And peatland fires generate about estimated 90% of the transboundary smoke haze in the region, because they burn so much longer and produce so much more particulate matter compared to the fires in dryland habitats. So in response to this very serious issue of peatland degradation and fires and transboundary haze, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations has developed a number of key policy frameworks to address this. This started with the ASEAN Agreement on Transboundary Haze Pollution, agreed by the 10 member states of ASEAN in 2002. And that was very quickly followed by the ASEAN Peatland Management Initiative in 2003, 21 years ago, which basically recognized, because of the root cause of much of the transboundary haze from peatland degradation, creating a mechanism to bring together the 10 member states to share experience and to assess and work together to address this issue of peatland management and degradation. Coming out of that was an agreement to have a broad ASEAN peatland management strategy or roadmap to map out the key strategies and actions to have sustainable peatland management. And the first phase of that was adopted by the ASEAN Ministerial Meeting on the Environment in 2006 and run till 2020. And that has been recently reviewed, revised, expanded, and extended up to 2030. So this is, I think, one of the best models globally of a regional strategy for peatlands, which has been adopted at the top level of government. It's been referenced by the head of state meeting various times. And unfortunately, the reason why there is such high political support for this peatland is for the wrong reason, and that's because of the degradation and the impact of fires and transboundary haze. So having had this plan now for 18 years already, there has been very significant progress. In the first phase of ASEAN Peatland Management Strategy, there was 97 different actions identified, and almost 100% of those actions were initiated, and almost estimated at 70% completion of all of the targets in the first phase up to 2020. But now in the extension of the framework to 2030, there have been some more specific and ambitious targets have been set. So some of the measures that have been taken to address the issue of fires and transboundary haze are one of the root causes was the large-scale drainage. On the top left, you can see is one of the main drainage canal developed in the so-called Mega Rice Project, where more than 1 million hectares of peatland was deforested and drained to create a large rice field, but the peat was up to 15 meters thick, and the rice could not grow on that system. So it all was burned and abandoned in the large El Nino fires in 97, 98. So there have been effort to restore this. You can see this is a block installed by hand by local community, restoring and rewetting that system. Subsequently, most of the member states have recognized the importance to rewet, to block abandoned drainage canal, logging canals, and other issues, and to improve water management in plantations. So across Southeast Asia, governments have basically issued policies to stop the drainage and conversion of peatlands and supported large-scale restoration initiatives. In addition, the private sector, which in the past was one of the main parties responsible for large-scale clearance and drainage of peatlands, have also agreed, for example, through the framework of the Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil. For the past 6 years, it's been agreed by all of the member companies, no more drainage or conversion of peatlands, and that all peatlands which have been converted in the past must be managed according to very strict best management practices, and that the companies, where possible appropriate, should look at phasing out oil palm plantation on peat before you get to a very subsided peat, degraded situation that you can no longer cultivate. So actually the requirement under RSPO is basically 40 years before the peat will subside to a level where it's vulnerable to flood. Then the company must stop replanting the oil palm and must either restore it back to natural forest or to use so-called polluter crop, which can tolerate the higher water table. Also, companies are also investing a lot in restoration of adjacent areas within and adjacent to the plantation areas. So just coming to the new ASEAN Peatland Management Strategy, there are a dozen focal areas and some key goals. One is all peatlands in the ASEAN region are mapped, and that work in Cambodia I presented earlier is part of that. But still we have gaps in upland peat and also countries like Myanmar, where we don't have a complete coverage. For restoration rehabilitation, 30% of degraded peatlands in ASEAN have been or are under rehabilitation by 2030. And we do have, for some countries, very significant portion of degraded peatlands. Maybe there's some debate about what the degraded means, but this is, I think, maybe it's defined in the assessment. There's a further meeting next week to look at the detailed monitoring plan for this. 30% of peatlands in ASEAN included in protected areas. We saw the figures earlier for Asia. Only 10% of peatlands in Asia are in protected area. And actually for Southeast Asia, the figure is lower. It's about 3 to 5% of peatlands are in totally protected areas. But there are initiatives by government, for example, under the peatland regulation in Indonesia. They have designated about 50% of the peatland hydrological unit to be set aside as protected area, but it does not have the same weight as a formal national park or protected area. It's a restriction on development. Transboundary haze from peatland fires is eliminated, another important goal. Peatlands protected and rehabilitated to enhance resilience to climate change and reduce emissions towards a target of net zero emissions by 2050. Within that, there is various strict actions or objectives laying out the need to change agricultural practice, plantation practice, improve water management within agricultural plantation areas, and try to phase in alternate crops that can grow with a high water table. For integrated peatland management, this is a very essential area, and the ASEAN member states have adopted basically a framework which was initiated by Indonesia, and that is to classify all peatlands within the framework of peatland hydrological units. So those area around the peatland which either provide the water to the peatland in valley peatlands or receive the water from the peatland in terms of the domed or the bog peatland systems. And that need to have the engagement of private sector, agriculture, plantation, forestry, environment, and local community in that integrated management. And also lastly, need to set up sustainable financing mechanisms. I spoke this morning in another session about the financing mechanism targeting to raise $1.5 to $2 billion across ASEAN over up to 2030 to support not only peatland management, but other sustainable management approaches. So this is the ASEAN investment framework on haze-free sustainable land management. And these are basically the key targets that have been accepted by the 10 ASEAN member states in August last year. We're having a meeting next week in Bangkok to see how we're progressing towards this, but identified 2.2 billion of funding needed for peatlands. Number 3, sustainable forest and peatland management, $850 million identified. Already there are a number of projects and programs in pipeline, and also a number of other mechanisms with private sector, climate finance, and other means to generate more sustaining resources or predictable resources to support the action on peatlands. So I just go into one country in particular, and that country is Indonesia, because Indonesia, and this has been highlighted within the Global Peatland Assessment, is one of the countries globally with very significant progress in the last 20, 30 years in having policies, regulations, and the processes. This started actually even before this. I mentioned 2011 is highlighted here, but going back even almost 30 years, there have been some regulation, some clear guidance on peatland protection in Indonesia. In 2011, a moratorium on new license for plantation development on peatland was issued, and then the very significant national regulation on the protection and management of peatland ecosystems was issued in 2014 and revised in 2016. And this is providing the major framework for peatland management in the country. And under that regulation, peatlands are mapped and managed within 850 peatland hydrological units, covering 24 million hectares. And those hydrological units are divided into conservation, so-called conservation and utilization zones. A peatland restoration agency was established in 2016 with a target to restore 2.4 million hectares of degraded peatland. The achievement by 2020 was 3.2 million hectares with enhanced water management, but mainly in private concession areas. So oil palm plantation and forest plantations. That does not mean fully restored back to natural forest. That means better improved water management in the plantation areas, but some portion of that, about 300,000 hectares, was restored through natural revegetation in the concession areas, and about 10,000 hectares restored by local community with support of government and also private sector. The remit of the Peatland Restoration Agency originally was meant to end in 2020, but it was extended by the government and also given additional remit to restore 600,000 hectares of mangroves, as well as a further 1.2 million hectares of peatlands. So this is just a snapshot of the coverage of the peat ecosystem function zone, and you can see the area of designated for conservation is in blue, and the area allowed for utilization is in red, but on average it's about 50%, 50-50. But actually the regulation says that all areas of intact forest, all areas of forested or peatland important for genetic diversity, for biodiversity conservation, and all area of peat deeper than 3 meters must be within conservation area. An area outside can be within utilization area, but those utilization area need to have proper, very clear, strict management and implementation plans. And based on this, there has been basically a large-scale program for the re-wetting of better water management and the monitoring. So there is a national system for monitoring of water level in those production areas, and that includes a combination of canal blocks of water management structure installed in the production area, and a very large network of data loggers and rainfall stations. So this actually is very difficult for you to read here, but this totally coming to about 11,000 groundwater monitoring units, covering now about 3.5 million hectares is covered by this. So this is one of the largest near real-time peatland water monitoring programs in the world. There's nowhere else in the world that has this system. 15% of the sites are mandated to have real-time live data sharing with the national government. And that means the national government at any one time on the smartphone or in the office can get the data from any part of the country or the whole country at once and see what is the water level in all of those monitored peatlands. Of course, there are areas outside the monitoring, particularly in community lands and in, one could say, abandoned areas. There may not be proper monitoring, but this is a very significant tool, and that has helped in the enforcement of the regulation which require higher water level. The government set the water level to be set at about 40 centimeters below level, ground level. Initially, that was protested a lot by the oil palm plantation and the pulp and paper concession that traditionally had the water level between 75 centimeter to 1.5 meters below the surface. And they said all our plantations will die. This will not be functional. But latest information is indicating that the plantations are still able to function. The productivity is still maintained. In fact, for some plantations of oil palm are reporting higher yields with the higher water table. So this potentially is a win-win. But of course, still with a 40 centimeter water level, you're still having significant emission, but you're having much less fire risk. So this is a very major policy measure that has been put in place and combined now coming towards 28,000, actually more than 30,000 canal blocks have been installed, and nearly 1,000 rainfall stations and monitoring programs. So by 2024, water levels have been raised on about 4 million hectares of peat. In Indonesia, fire and degradation has been significantly reduced. We just went through a El Nino drought for 9 months from last year to this year. And in previous equivalent droughts, there were a period of 4 months with no rain in southern Sumatra. In the equivalent period previously in 2015, with those weather conditions, we were getting massive smoke clouds covering several countries in the region. But although there were fires last year during this drought condition, they were not as extensive as before, significantly reduced from previous equivalent situation, and hardly any transboundary smoke haze. So very great improvement was done. I believe water management was one of the critical factors, enhanced awareness, engagement of the stakeholders, but also more active real-time monitoring enforcement. And also Indonesia has introduced a very good multi-stakeholder fire prevention monitoring teams, which involve for the critical fire-prone areas, police, military, local government, local community, environment agencies, media, and civil society. And this has also helped transform attitude and the practice in those areas. So also Indonesia and some other countries in Southeast Asia are exploring alternatives to deep drainage and exploring economically viable paludiculture crops. One of the one which is best established is sagu, sago palm. Although Malaysia, for example, has had a major failure in trying to grow sago in peat, basically because it took the wrong variety, took the variety from mineral soil and tried to grow in peat, and after 10 years harvested and there was no sago starch in the trunk. But Indonesia, there are areas and varieties which have a good production on peat. There are other things like gelatong, as I mentioned earlier, not only used for chewing gum, but for moldings and electrical insulation. There are many products that can come from indigenous peats from forestry. This is the Alipi nut, shoria, which is also like the shea butter used in cosmetic and the food industry. So just to conclude, there are 7 specific options for action in Asia identified in the GPA report. Firstly, enhanced peatland mapping and assessment for comprehensive land use planning. So we need to know the peat where it is. As was highlighted earlier, we need to know the peat depth and the carbon stock, because that is the potential for long-term carbon storage, but also the risk in case of degradation of emission. We need to incorporate local community needs and participation in decision-making with focus on gender inclusivity. Many of the peatland area, we have seen that the indigenous people and local community have been for hundreds or thousands of years acting as the stewards of the land. They have very good traditional practices which have been serving to maintain peatlands, but that has often been disrupted by outside external driven interventions. But engaging them again, empowering them is an important way forward. Number 3, halt further conversion of peatlands through protection measures and investment. That basically has been agreed by the 2 large countries with the largest peatland area, Indonesia and Malaysia. No more extensification into peatland area, and also measures to phase out operation. Expand peatland restoration and rewetting efforts with sustainable livelihood options such as paludiculture and supportive policies. Number 5, share successful collaboration initiatives, South-South and triangular cooperation, globally and within the region to foster knowledge exchange, such as through ASEAN, GPI, or the International Peatland Congress here in China is one of the mechanisms for sharing. Consider integrated reduced emission from deforestation and degradation, which is an important tool or mechanism, particularly for tropical forest countries with forested peatlands. And lastly, assess the outcomes of peatland restoration and sustainable management, including greenhouse gas emission and restoration success, and use that to input into future policy arrangements. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any question for Mr. Paris?
Thank you for your presentation. I have a question. So the first one is, what is the main difference between the Asian policy framework in 2003 and with the new one 2023 to 2030? And then the second question is there any data that you can show us about the progress of the restoration activities? I mean, for example, what is the % of the peat fire reduced following the implementation of the policy?
Okay, so the main difference, I think, as I highlighted in the new strategy, we have very clear targets which have been set. I think that the need for inventory and assessment was already very clearly there before, but for restoration rehabilitation, there was no numerical target of how to restore, how much to restore, so 30% of that. And then the target for protected areas, again, this is something new. Previously, there was just general encouragement to look at conservation area, but now a target setting of 30% of the area, taking from the current 5 to 10%. So that's a very significant increase, but that's in line with the negotiated agreement at the Global Biodiversity Framework of 30% by 2030. So I think those are some of the ones. The other key area which is different is on peatlands and climate change. I mean, at the time in 2006, when developing the earlier one, it was sort of recognized, but there was very little documentation of the importance of peatland for carbon storage and the importance of global significance of the emission from degradation, and almost nothing known about the impacts of climate change on peatlands in the region. So that has been highlighted, and this just gives the goal, but there are many, many more detailed objectives and actions. So that full plan as a peatland management strategy is available online. Just in terms of the second thing about the success story, I did say about 70% of the actions identified were earlier actions in the first phase up to 2020 were implemented. What has that led to in terms of a reduction? We don't have a complete figures nationwide or region-wide, but for example, in Malaysia, I can say in the Selangor state, which is the state which has the highest proportion of peat, 22% of the land area is peat. There has been a 98% reduction in peatland fire in the natural peatland areas as a result of integrated management and restoration measures. And then, as I mentioned in the last El Nino event, again, we don't have a detailed, I don't have here the detailed data, but very significant reduction in the extent and in severity of the fires, particularly in those areas of 4 million hectare where there was improved water management, a very, very significant reduction in the amount of fires, extent and severity. When you re-wet, you may still have some surface fire, but it doesn't burn deeply into the peat and burn for months as it did before. But I think still we need some researchers to probe into those figures from the last 12 months to look at that compared to the previous time. Those are the two major issues. And on the policies, I think, as I mentioned, so many new policy regulation have been made, and also a lot of improvement in best management practice guidelines come out for agriculture, plantation, and other sectors. So I think those are some of the achievements earlier. So the new phase, obviously, it's not completed everything. There's still more to go, and a need to inject more resources to scale up the implementation of the policy. Thank you.
One more question.
Please identify yourself just for those before you speak, and for those online to hear.
Hi, yes, my name is Alma. I'm from University of Leicester. I just would like to ask you about, because we also have research in the peatland area with the communities in Indonesia. So what we found on the ground is most of the time the project is like short term, so they haven't got enough time to obtain all the skill for them to learn the new livelihood, also the new crops. So the project just stopped, and then there is no more funding for them to continue and even more to develop them for their livelihood. So I just wonder whether you also think about the longer term for the continue or the longevity of the project. And also the second one is about the paludiculture crops, because most of the paludiculture crops take a long time to get the first harvest. So so far we haven't got like a quicker paludiculture crops. Only like a few that maybe only for the local like farm.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Okay.
that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you. So just briefly, you can see number 3 on the slide there in terms of the ASEAN strategy. This is again a change from before. Community livelihood is put as an overall focal area with a goal. That was not there in the previous version. So that's something new inserted. In terms of the period of the project, there's more implementation issue, and that vary between the countries. But I think the conclusion from all the work is, like you were saying, impossible to do one-off activity and then expect that will transform life and transform community. From our experience working in peatland areas the last 30+ years with community, you need at least 5 or more years with community, and you have to really empower the community in terms of them having the land rights and the other things for the area, and that they can really have control of the area. If they're seen just doing something because government has come or donor has come and given something or given one lecture and some money and expecting to change, it's not going to change like that. It takes a much longer sustained approach that really needs to be done. So I think that's something that needs to be done in future, but this is the regional plan. Each country has its own national plan. But Indonesia has already developed a plan till 2049. So basically the next 30 years, 25 years, and that plan should be having every 5 years like a rolling review or update. So, and that plan will be translated, or I mean, basically developed at the province and the district level. So there are opportunities for research, civil society, other stakeholders to contribute to those detailed implementation plan and to ensure that it's a long-term approach is used for community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's move on. Our next speaker is Serena Liu, and from Global Environmental Center. They are going to talk about the local empowerment of peatland conservation from a community-based peatland management in Riau. Please welcome Serena.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm representing Yayasan Gambut, who is actually they cannot come, so we have a joint paper here to present on the local empowerment for peatland conservation for community-based peatland management in Riau. So these are some slides here is actually to respond to your question just now on the sustainable livelihood activities. So this map, basically, we took from the Riau Provincial Peatland Ecosystem Protection and Management Plan for 30 years. So you see the time frame is 2021 to 2050. It's actually 30 years plan. Like mentioned by Faisal just now, they have like long-term plan, but they also have the 5 years rolling plan to review the activities to improve what need to be in the next 5 years implementation. So this actually, Riau Province has 60% of their land area are actually peatlands. So they have a lot of issues. They have a fire issue, they have the vegetation issue, they have the subsidence issue as well. That extensive losses affecting millions of hectares and a very significant economic damage resulting from the fires. So Yayasan Gambut is facilitating on the community land sustainable peatland management in Riau. They're promoting zero burning agriculture. Also encourage the fire prevention, bring together the community to look into this hydrological management, and also trying on the horticulture options. So we say trying because we don't know which crop or species basically working on the riveted area. So we need to try. Usually it's a try and errors because we have like more than 100 species actually available or suitable for the horticulture practice, but it much depends on the site. One site can survive doesn't mean that it can survive in every site. So it much depends on the site condition. On the zero burning agriculture, we actually started, I think more than 10 years ago with the Makmur Jaya Women Farmers Group to transform the burning activity into this zero burning activity. So they started with the red ginger and also the tomato. So you see the photos at the top right. they're actually gathering the pit area and then to do the ginger planting on that land. After that, look into this longer term or the medium term, they actually cultivate coffee trees as the agroforestry models, so that they have the short term for the ginger, because ginger basically can harvest like 8 months to 12 months. It much depends on the management practices. And also for the coffee will start fruiting after 2 to 3 years. Then they have the harvest for the short term from the ginger, and then after that, the medium term of the coffee. So it's actually sustaining their practices, meaning that start planting already, okay, teach them how to do the silviculture, fertilizer and fertilization, and also pest control. Then basically they can continue the activities even though the project already finished. Okay. You can see the photo at the bottom right. There's actually the ginger powder for ginger drinks. And now it's actually available in the market in Riau province. So on the polyculture and the sago cultivation aspect, the community actually have cultivating sago for many years. I would say that it's more than 100 years, because the community already there for a long time. These native plants, basically we don't really need to plant it, because it will just germinate themselves naturally. It's actually in the clump form. So the cultivation of the native plants on the peatlands without disturbing the sustainability of the ecosystem, and helping to restore and preserve the environment, improve the economy and welfare of the people in and around the peatlands. Focusing on the sago cultivation capitalizes on Riau's extensive sago area, and adding value through production of various processed food, such as the sago noodles, sago fat, sago eggs, and sago crackers. These are the byproducts that we can use or we can produce by the sago starch. So we don't only produce the sago starch one product, but we engage the government agencies or even the private sector to invest, so that the community are trained and then they can produce more. And the other side in Malaysia, actually in Muka, Sarawak, they actually have a long history also in these byproducts productions. Okay, on the water management aspect, the community has been undertaking the initiative to increase the water capacity. So construction of canal blocks and deep wells strategically in the area prone to drying out due to artificial drainage in order to mitigate fire risk. So they have to assess the location, need to have the stakeholder engagement discussions, try to understand what is the usage of the canal. We cannot just simply go in and then starting to, blocking canals. After that, have the conflicts. Then the community definitely will open up the blocks, meaning that our effort going to be wasted, because not easy to build the canal blocks, but then having conflict and then being damaged by the community. So before we put the canal block in certain location, we need to have the discussion with the community. We need to get the consent. Okay. So this community engagement and fire prevention, we establish or we facilitate to establish the community fire brigade. So Indonesia already have very good system. They have already the Manggala Army by the government agencies, and then have the 3 parties collaboration from the army, police, community to set up this Manggala Army system. Indonesia also have this Desa Peduli Gambut. So in assisting the community and also assisting the government agencies to really look after the peatland area, especially those degraded and fire-prone peatland areas. So the patrol teams will monitor the peatland areas every day. During the dry season, this Manggala Army will receive the hotspot notification if their area has a hotspot. Then these people, they have to go down to the site and check and report back to their commander. Commander will compile all the information and submit to the central government, which actually directly under minister. So this is another innovative tool that developed by Indonesian government. is an on-site groundwater monitoring tool. So you can see there's a piezometer together with the signboard. So there's a fire risk signboard. Aman basically is a safe. We are in a safe zone if we are in blue. So we are in a medium risk if we are in green, and then high risk zone in yellow, and extreme risk when we are in the red zone. So you see the color code is different because this is the dry for the fire indicators. If we have the groundwater very below the ground surface, is actually your floating arrow will be very low. So there's an extreme. If we have a high water table, then our floating pump will be on top, and then we are in the safe zone. So this is a mechanical design by the government, and also include the traditional knowledge by the community. This is very useful because we don't really need to send people to change the indicators or change the color code at the signboard. This is automated. Okay. So the impacts and the success of this initiative. Again, collaboration and joint effort will showcase the success of the Sustainable Peatland Management Initiative in Riau, in Indonesia. Community commitment to horticulture and water management enhancement, promising model for effective peatland conservation. At the same time, we'll get a more and a sustainable income for the community. Community also prevent wildfires, at the same time diversify the economic opportunity. So the key message here basically is the local success story highlights the positive impacts that local community initiatives can have on both environmental preservation and also community well-being. So I think for your listening to my presentation, and then I need to acknowledge here the funders and the partners such as IFAD, NGO, CSO partners, and local government agencies, central government from the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. In particular, in the different levels, that has been providing administrative guidance and on-site collaboration for peatland conservation and management activities at the project sites. So we have different projects by the Indonesian government that we can learn from. So we learn from there, and then we will continue to work further to sustainably manage the valuable peatland ecosystem in the areas. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Any question for Serena?
Many thanks, Serena, for a very interesting presentation. I've got a question for you, maybe Faisal, but also Pak Agus. In Brazil, so in a very different context, the government has very successfully used an intergovernmental fiscal transfer mechanism, which initially started out as a social mechanism to encourage mothers to get their children to school and get their children vaccinated. But then it developed into an environmental intergovernmental fiscal transfer mechanism as a way of trying to encourage people not to use fire as a land clearance tool. And I wanted to ask, has this been discussed as an opportunity or an option in the Asian context? Because the institutional cultures are very different. But I just wanted to ask whether that has also been looked at as one way of looking at improving land use and land management.
Okay, thank you, Andrew, for the question. I think this is the second time you raised the issue on the youth engagement. Yes, in the previous project, we did have engagement with the schools in Riau province, specifically. For the secondary school and also primary school, I think we engaged one primary school and one secondary school on this issue, and then we have the awareness campaign. For Malaysia context, yes, under GC, we also engage with the school for awareness events, and also in the community that we basically invite adults and also the children come forward to us when we have the awareness event. And for Philippines, I think we also engage with the university as well.
Maybe I can just add on the fiscal transfer issue. On fiscal transfer, we had one experience in Philippines where we linked with the government conditional fund transfer from the Ministry of Welfare to the village, and that we were able to tie in. Before it was just the fund was just provided with no condition. It was an unconditional transfer of fund to the village, and we were able to get, or basically our Philippine partners government partners were able to get that tied into additional allocation to those villages that made an effort for, that was more for reforestation and restoration within the peatland area, not specifically on the fire issue. On the fire issue, fiscal transfer, there's been an effort in Thailand, basically to get the rice farmer who are traditionally burning to sign up with a phone application to register their land, basically with a scheme to give them an incentive if they did not burn their agricultural residuals, which would then be verified by satellite tracking. So that's the only two scheme I'm aware of in Asia, but I think very useful to have the experience from Brazil and to share that with the governments in the ASEAN region about specifically on fire avoidance. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Serena. Oh, you have more questions?
So just to add, in terms of where we're actually seeing EFTs in Indonesia, they're actually there, right? They're working on the mechanisms. The Asia Foundation actually has supported this work quite a bit. And where this is happening is where it's being transferred from the national to province, and the province can decide what to do. It's also going from province to the districts, so kabupaten level. But this is really being thought about at the jurisdictional level. So thinking of peatlands as part of it, part of the ecosystem within these political boundaries, administrative boundaries, is really crucial. So I'm going to make a plug for not only landscape approaches, but jurisdictional approaches, which play a huge role in trying to really get to sustainability in a way, in a place where there are actually decision makers that are involved can actually influence that and put it into policies. Thank you, Shweta, for the additional input. Thank you for the input.
Sorry, it's me again. I just want to make a couple of comments regarding the first is culture crop. Yeah, it's really important to find the right crop for the right place and the right communities. But I think we've done a big study like 4 years ago, Uda et al. Co-author with that. We assessed the Liberica coffee and also other crops, and we found that it's not really quite. I mean, it's still big emission. So it's not kind of agriculture crop. And also, I think from Houston Group, Griswold, like the crop that we exploit the root, also not suitable for polyculture crops. So that's just a few comments. So maybe we need to explore more. We found that in our study that like sagu and galam is the best one, but yeah, it takes a long time to get the first harvest. Yeah, and the problem is also with the intervention. It really depends on the government budget at the moment. So, and then the budget is already planned like a year ahead, but what the community needs now is sometimes different. Like the budget is for providing the seed for the farmers, but what the farmer really needs is actually the like equipment and fertilizer. So it kind of mismatch. Maybe we can kind of make a flexibility for the farmers, and also for the incentive for the firefighter, like Masyarakat Peduli Api. On the ground, they don't really get enough incentive. It's only during the fire, and it's very small, like 100,000 rupiah a day. So it kind of voluntary job, they say. So they really need to work on how the community really gets value from this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Bu Alma. For the horticulture crop, yes, they need to have a more research and more study on that. For galam, if not mistaken, actually they can use the extract. The leaves also can be used. It much depends the species, I guess, and where to plant it. And then for the horticulture, basically, is much depends the area, the origin, whether the sago can survive at the area itself, and then it's like expanding that into the nearby area. That's a one priority. Not to say that we have a new crop into a new area, then it will take time. Yeah. Yeah, and the processing also, the transport also, because the transport, one is have to wait 10 years to harvest. Second is the transporting the log is not easy, and then is a relate to the river. So it's the river transport for the sagu trunk, right? And then for the other one is on the Mangala Ani, the Masyarakat Peduli Api, the allowance. I think there has been quite a big debate on the allowance because we don't want to have the fire. So at the first place, we need to prioritize to have the fire prevention rather than firefighting. So actually more budget needed for the fire prevention rather than more allowance for the firefighting. I think that's the key also for that. But we do understand you have a lot of issue, and we also understand we have. Yeah, sometimes it's just difficult because when there's a fire, you get allowance. But if there's no fire, you don't have allowance, you know. So we may not know whether the community is going to set the fire. Yes.
A lot of effort to protect their field and garden.
Yeah.
So I don't think they will allow fire.
And at the moment, actually, Indonesian government, Kementerian actually have this three terms crops, the short-term, medium-term, and the long-term crops, to make sure the area always have the harvest for the community. So they really take care, because the cash crop, maybe you can harvest like 5 months to 8 months, is actually needed the very high water table so that the vegetables can survive. So it's actually have a higher yield and then a higher support from the community on the fire prevention. Because the fire issue is really hard. Yeah, thank you.
Any other quick question, comment? Oh, really? So, you know, I just want to make sure, you know, I don't, shut you down. So please make
thank you so much. I am Dede Suleiman from WRA Indonesia. I have two questions actually, but about do you have any experience in doing community engagement, which the people are more interested in short-term benefit? I hope you understand with this terminology. I want to use the terminology with money, but I think it's not appropriate to say this here. Yeah. And what's your suggestion to overcome these issues? And the second one, I think you have done a good activities with Yayasan Gambut. Do you think it can be duplicated in other areas in Indonesia, like Kalimantan, with other with more various demography, like trans migrants? Because a lot of trans migrants in Indonesia reside in peatlands area or around peatland area. So that's my questions. Thank you.
Okay, if I understand correctly on the short-term benefit, it maybe refers to the incentive, but always the incentive have the lifespan because it much depends on the money we have in our national budget. If that incentive come from the government side, but if the incentive come from the private sector side, it's different story because they have to comply with the requirements. Desa Peduli Gambut or Desa Peduli Api is a certain program facilitated by the private sector. So it's giving the incentive not in money form, but to improve their infrastructure. Because there are a lot of these villages inside or nearby plantation concessions. So this company actually adopting them, but not giving money. But they give the incentive like improve their road system, improve their water filtering in the villages. So this is something that the communities should be happy that their basic living standard or facilities being improved, rather than they have like few million rupiah for one time, and then after that they spend the money, then there's no more benefit. Second question on the whether there's a plan to expand to Kalimantan or somewhere else within Indonesia. I think Yayasan government will be more than happy to collaborate, because I think a lot of things that we can do, but the issue is we do not have enough hands, because we usually work with the partners, how we can support the community, because the activities with the community to build the trust is not easy, especially if Yayasan government operationally they are based in Riau. If they want to move to Kalimantan, is a bit of distance, is very far from Sumatra Islands to the Kalimantan border, right? So if we can have partners there, is actually good. And I believe that many NGOs already there in Kalimantan. If in the mega rice area, I think more than 50 organizations already there, the local LSM already there. So how are we going to gather them and then work in one big goal, rather than everyone have their own objective? So I think we can have the better collation or collaboration with the partners, rather than be expanding ourselves. And then we are getting bigger, more activities, but then we cannot focus. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Serena. I think it's very important work, and I did several research in Riau before, and also looking at some practices of this community intervention. What I've usually found was that the challenge is because the intervention, while it is important to provide alternatives, livelihood for these communities, and at micro level, then these alternatives does work, it is often not sustainable in long term, because of the structural factors. I mean, intervening the community is one thing, but then ensuring continued demands for that particular commodity, for example, is another challenge. So is there any lessons or any insights on how to ensure this experiments in creating and providing alternative commodities, alternative livelihoods, to ensure that, they are scaling up quick enough, that the demand is there, that the market continue to grow, and just because of that, the initiative can continue.
Yeah, thanks for that question. So when we engage the community, we identify their problems, their gaps, challenges, and then we try to improve the practices so they improve their productivity. So that we cannot just go straight to the community themselves. We need to work with the village committee. So the committee Ketua Kampung, Ketua Desa, so they are involved from the beginning. So we work together with them, plan together, and then we executing the activity together. So one-on-one, because this is other people's land, it's not our land, right? So we respect them, because we want to ensure there's a sustainability. So every village in Indonesia, they have this village fund, Dana Desa, right? So that is being administrated by the village committee. So we talk to them, plan with them, and then they already can put into their next year plan. So it much depends on the priority. So every village have their own priority. So not to say that, okay, this is a fire issue, but the area always being flooded wouldn't have the fire issue, right? So then they have a different priorities, and then talk to the village committee, and then they can build into their how to use their village fund for the next year or the next 2 years. So you basically need to work together with different stakeholders. The other one is to work with the private sector in the village, so that they can contribute, because the private sector, if they are from the oil palm sector, they'll be there for 20, 30 years for the one cycle. For the HTE, for the forest plantation, maybe it's a shorter, 10 years or 20 years, depends on their license, right? So I think that hope answer your question on the sustainability side.
All right, thank you. Any other question and comment? If you do, maybe talk to Serena later on. So after session, right? You have a question from audience remotely? They usually, there's no written one, so I can tell. So if you have a question and a comment, a suggestion, talk to Serena and other people after session, after the end of the session. That's really great to have a, that kind of discussion. So thank you very much, Serena. This is really nice, package of talk presentation on Asian peatland. So Zhao Jun provide kind of very nice summary of diverse peatland from Arctic to tropical, and so cover many different issues, right? So relate to the peatland, and Faith will provide a nice detailed overview of tropical, Southeast Asia peatland with focus on country level Indonesia, dealing with the issue related to, if I remember correctly, so the current issue and management strategy, investment framework, and option for action. So this is really, the whole package. And then Serena provide the provincial level and the local level kind of experience, and with a lot of practical issue. Obviously, Serena presentation stimulates a lot of discussion, right? So truly reflect, what we always talk about, right? Think globally, global issue actually, what matters is locally, right? So as local, so that's great. And also this, also the goal and the motivation for the global peatland assessment, right? So we use that framework for the discussion. We, at the session and even afterward, during the next few days, that go beyond global peatland assessment, right? So that would be the great goal. So wonderful. So so Patrick put a really nice list of presentations. So because we have all the case study, right, from continental level, country level, regional level, and the local level. So we're not going to do the next presentation. So specific case. So we just move on. We have adequate case in our presentation discussion already. So I think we'll move on to the last presentation. And so I was given the assignment to provide a brief summary of GPA conclusion and recommendation. So I think we have a few slides. So I'm going to go over and provide a summary. All right, so you can see that, Patrick, right? So remotely. Yeah, this is the so GPA conclusion and recommendation, and summarize everything.
Well, sorry, we cannot see the slides.
Okay, so yeah, we need to share the
Close the previous one. Sharing.
So Patrick, you can hear all the discussion, all right? Presentation.
Yeah, but it's fine. I mean, you can start.
Oh, it's not. Can you see it?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah. Let me see. All right. So first of all, is the GPA global peatland assessment, the key finding, and the three of them. And the first, so healthy peatland are being lost and degrade at a rate that is 10 times faster than their rate of expansion over the last 10,000 years during the Holocene. And so 12% of the current global peatland are degraded. So this is one key finding from the peatland global peatland assessment. And the second, so peatland degradation, so including fire, is releasing 2,000 megaton CO2 equivalent of greenhouse gas emission per year. And this represents 4% of the total global anthropogenic emission and the fossil fuel burning and other land exchange and everything. So, and we talk about how that greenhouse gas emission from peatland contribute to the emission budget, right? For at the end of the century, if you want to get below 1.5 degree warming or 2 degree warming, so a significant amount, right? So 12% or 42%. So this second key finding from GPA, and the third finding is the diversity among the peatland definition in use in different parts of the world that has hampered effort to consistently identify, map, and manage peatland on a global scale. So, Alex talked about that earlier. So this assessment uses definition of peatland as ecosystem with the peat soil of any thickness is consistent with the Convention on Wetland Definition. And for practical purposes, so widely used 30 to 40 centimeter peat threshold. It, however, recognized, so GPA recognized that 10 centimeter threshold might be more appropriate in order to account for peatland contribution to climate change mitigation, related to carbon sequestration. So country may consider this, especially in future mapping and the inventory or assessment, to fully capture the extent of their peatland carbon stock and facilitate effective policy for protection, restoration, and the sustainable use. So, the 30 centimeter or 40 centimeter, and some cases, I think 50 centimeter in different countries resources inventory, right, for peatland resources actually, from a climate change mitigation point of view, so even shallow peat can be important. So that's the issue of realize that there influence all the basic, knowledge and information about the peatland extent and the distribution. So this is a practical, challenge and the issue. So we need to deal with. So this is the third GPA key finding. So 3 key findings. And the focus on declaration and the greenhouse emission and the way forward actually into a methodology. So this lists some options for action. So what we need to do, and the GPA find one is develop and maintain data system on peatland extent and the condition and the usage to inform policy planning and regulation. So national wetland inventory prepared by the party to the Convention on Wetland are a good starting point for such system. So we need to develop an international system, the database, for many other uses. And second, extend the protected area system to include peatland using evidence on location, conservation status of peatland provided in this assessment. So this is peatland assessment that used as a baseline, and for several talks today, mention small area of peatland globally being protected by a natural reserve, national park, and so on and so forth. And the third, place a buffer zone around the peatland so that encroaching threat can be averted in collaboration with local community before they result in damage. So this kind of one strategy. So separate disturbance agent from peatland. And number 4, so straighten regulation to prevent or halt harmful operation like peatland drainage for agriculture and forestry, and in advertent loss of peatland for other uses like mineral, oil, and peat extraction. So a lot of country actually has regulation already. So over the last 2 days, from the IPC, so International Peatland Congress, so talk about that, especially start from Europe. I think they ban certain activity related to PTU. So number 5, so initiate a medium-term plan for phasing out harmful operation that are already taking place and establish licenses that require more sustainable practice and peatland restoration obligation for the transition period. The number 6, form fair and transparent gender responsive governance systems that cross-sector and empower stewardship by indigenous people and the local communities who evolve decision-making, such as indigenous co-management and community-led conservation, so on. So this is a fair, kind of, social justice, right? So issue deal with, especially in kind of remote area and the developing country. I think that become an important issue as well. So we have more option for action. So the number 7, so create a subsidy and the fiscal mechanism that incentivize practice that support protection, restoration, and the sustainable management of peatland. And the number 8, so eliminate perverse incentive and disincentive activity that are driving peatland degradation and the conversion. And the number 9, use the blended finance to combine public and private sector funding to scale up the conservation, restoration, and sustainable management of peatland. I think that kind of project in other environmental protection conservation area as well. So we should use that in peatland protection. So try to leverage, private funding, additional to public funding, taxpayer money. That's the company, those people or company make a lot of money to do something good, right? So we think for the entire community. So also carbon and other ecosystem market mechanism, as well as a range of green finance instruments have the potential to provide return to investor and benefit to local population if proper safeguards are in place. So this is number 9, related to financing. And the number 10, so establish robust monitoring framework to ensure action for peatland conservation, restoration, and sustainable management is tracked. So I think the discussion, in the morning with a similar topic of presentation. This must then be reported on in line with the national and the international reporting obligation and used to inform future management. So number 11, so I think that the last option for action, support collaboration and engage in international networks and the initiative that work to advance the intersectoral decision making and the interdisciplinary research on peatland. So emphasize research and the international collaboration, which include, that global peatland assessment or similar assessment to move our peatland research science and practice forward and so on. So this, GPA key finding and then option for action. So 3 key finding, 11 option for action. And so, beside the online interactive map produced by the UN Environment Program and the GPI, Global Peatland Initiative, Asian peatland story map has also been developed to provide accessible and easy to understand explanation of current state of Asian peatland. So highlighting their important peat distribution center and the current degradation status and options for action. So that's going to be really useful. So this platform is designed for policymaker and the general public. So it kind of really outreach, right? Make a difference. So aiming to raise awareness about the importance of peatland protection in Asia, it features a user-friendly, interactive interface with appealing visual content, including map, photo, figure and the graph to facilitate learning and understanding. So that's important. So not only, we talk about that in our group, academic meeting or meeting like this, congress like this, so but get message out to the general public. And since directly or through the general public, get message to the policymaker at local, regional, national, international level, then will make a big difference. So indeed, over the last few years, for last is around the same time we start and making the global peatland assessment. So the peatland, the importance of peatlands has been recognized internationally. So say climate change convention, COP meeting, conference of party meeting, and including that component. So that's really important, critical, for we, who work on us, who work on peatland. So we keep doing that, along that direction, and make a big difference. So I think that that all we have, so be part of the solution, right? So because the peatland matter, and this we list that the resources again, and so look into it and pass on the message and circulate those resources, and we get the message across to broader community. So that'll be great. So I think thank you all the speaker this afternoon for stimulating presentation, and also thankful to the audience and contributing to the discussion we have in the last 2 or 3 hours. So that's been wonderful. So I would like to thank Patrick from Global Peatland Initiative at the United Nations Environmental Program for putting that program together, and so getting speaker these together. That seemed to me is wonderful, and also thank to the organizer of that 17th International Peatland Congress for facilitating and arranging everything, all the logistical for that to happen. So that's been wonderful. So I don't know, any question, comment to me? I just read the summary recommendation, so I can respond on behalf for the I don't know. I mentioned that earlier, right? 200, few hundred, contributor from 51 countries. Or question, comment, suggestion in general, such as.
Zichen. Yeah, can you say something? Thank you. Yeah. So thank you very much, everybody. And yeah, so on behalf of the Global Peatlands Initiative, we're just very grateful with the organizers of the IPC, with the speakers and the participants from today, and especially with all of the contributors of the Global Peatlands Assessment that did all of this work possible. And I mean, it's been more than 1 year since we launched the GPA, and we see that there's still a lot of potential to disseminate the main findings of all of this work. And basically, we're bringing together the latest science, and we want to inform and overall to inspire action in policy, but also in research and practice. And we're very glad that this information is being shared through all of these different channels. And yeah, so that the GPA represents this baseline of the state of the world's peatlands, but now we're going to update this work with the Global Peatland Hotspot Atlas, as Alexandra presented earlier. And we're going to be launching this new work during UNFCCC COP29. So please keep an eye out for this work. And also it's important to highlight what Zichen just presented, that we just launched this online interactive global peatland map. And anybody can look at this information and explore the map and download the data set. And we are including also this accessible and user-friendly story maps per region, and we already started with the Asian peatlands as Sigyn presented, and we're going to share all of these links with you together with the slides that were presented today. So please help us disseminate within your peatland networks all of these resources, and yeah, because we want to be able to reach out to strategic policymakers and to the general public, so we can raise awareness about the importance of peatlands, and to understand how we can use all of this knowledge